The sun was sinking over the western plains, laying gold across the slow, dark water of the Willow Bend River. A lone rider approached from the south, his silhouette long and weary against the horizon. His name was Eli Carver, a widowed stonemason turned wanderer, heading nowhere in particular, just away from the places that reminded him of what he'd lost. He'd been on the trail for weeks, following the work that never lasted. Towns came and went like mirages, each one promising rest and offering only more dust. That evening, he reined in his horse at a bend in the river, drawn by the faint sound of humming. Down by the water's edge, a woman was kneeling, washing linen in the shallows. Her sleeves were rolled to the elbows, her hair pinned up carelessly beneath a wide straw hat. She wasn't young, the kind of woman most folks in the territory stopped noticing after 40. But there was a quiet steadiness about her that caught the dying light and held it. Eli dismounted, unsure why he'd stopped at all. Maybe it was a song. Maybe it was the way she paused every so often to look at the hills, as though expecting someone who never came. "Evening," he said finally. The woman looked up, startled but not afraid. "Evening," she replied, her voice soft and clear as water over stone. Eli tipped his hat. Didn't mean to intrude, just looking for a place to camp before dark. She studied him a moment before nodding toward the higher ground near a patch of wild sage. "You'll find solid footing up there. Don't light a fire too close to the grass. It's dry this week." "Appreciate that," Eli said. He hesitated, then added, "You live out here alone?" She wrung out a sheet and hung it over a low branch. "Not by choice. My husband passed 3 winters ago. The nearest town's a half-day north, but I managed fine." There was no pride in her words, just a matter-of-fact calm that made him respect her instantly. He introduced himself, and she told him her name was Clara May. The sun slipped below the ridge. Crickets began their chorus. A soft breeze carried the scent of sage and river mud. Eli built a small fire and shared what little coffee he had left. Clara joined him without ceremony, hands folded around the tin cup, eyes reflecting the flames. They didn't speak much, just fragments, the kind of talk that leaves room for thought. She asked about his travels. He told her the towns he'd passed and the stonework he left behind. She spoke of her orchard, the one she was trying to keep alive through drought and debt. "You do all that alone?" he asked. Her shoulders lifted slightly. "When there's no one left to help, you learn what you can carry." Eli nodded. He knew that weight. As the fire faded, the night deepened into stillness. Far across the prairie, lightning flickered behind clouds, heat storms that never brought rain. Clara rose to leave, gathering her basket. "You're welcome to water your horse at the well by the orchard come morning," she said. "The trail ahead runs long without shade." Eli watched her walk away through the dark, the hem of her dress brushing the grass. He didn't know why he said it, but the words slipped out before he could stop them. "Ma'am, you ever think of selling the place?" She stopped, turned. The firelight caught her face, not young, not smooth, but strong and full of life that refused to fade. "No," she said softly. "If I leave, the orchard dies, and it's the last thing he planted." Then she was gone, swallowed by the night and the sound of the river. Eli sat for a long time staring into the embers, listening to the whisper of water and wind. He told himself he'd ride on in the morning, but deep down, he already knew he wouldn't. Some places call you before you understand why, and some people do, too. Morning came thin and pale, the kind of dawn that doesn't so much arrive as quietly replace the dark. Eli woke to the river talking to itself, soft laps against the bank, a faint rustle of reeds. His fire had gone to ash. His coffee tin was empty, yet something in him felt fuller than it had in months. He saddled in the cool hush and followed the path Clara had pointed out, climbing through knee-high grass still silver with dew. From the rise, her place appeared in pieces first, an old windmill, a line of fence posts leaning like tired men, then the orchard itself. Rows of trees stood with stubborn patience, leaves dulled by dust, fruit small and hard from too many dry weeks. A homestead sat beyond it, not grand, not pitiful, simply lived in. A porch with a broom propped against the rail. A wash line stretched between two posts. Smoke curling from a chimney that had been repaired more than once, each patch a different shade. Claire was already outside, sleeves rolled again, hair pinned up in that no-nonsense way. She didn't act surprised to see him. She simply lifted a hand in greeting, as if this was how mornings were supposed to go. "You found it," she said. "I did," Eli answered, and realized he meant more than the path. Up close, he noticed the quiet details that told the truth of a place. The door hinge squeaked but held. The steps had been re-nailed. The porch posts were braced with scrap lumber shaped by a careful saw. Nothing here was fancy, but nothing was careless. Clara stepped aside. "Water's there. Horse trough's a little cracked, so don't leave him too long. He'll drink fast." Eli led his horse toward the well, and that was when he saw it. The stonework around the wellhead was shifting. One side had slumped, like a shoulder dropping in exhaustion. The rope had begun to rub against a rough edge. It was the kind of thing most folks wouldn't notice until it failed all at once. He ran his palm over the uneven stone. The surface was warm already, promising a hot day. "That's your well?" he asked. Clara followed his gaze. Her expression didn't change much, but her eyes did. Just a small tightening, a flicker of worry she tried to hide from herself. "It's been moody," she said. Eli looked at her, then at the orchard, then back at the well. He could almost hear the numbers ticking in the air. Water meant life. No water meant leaving. And Clara had told him last night she wouldn't leave. "Mind if I take a look?" he asked. Clara hesitated, not because she didn't want to help, but because accepting help had a cost, and people like her had learned to count it. "Do what you want," she said finally, but the way she said it sounded like a test. Like, "I've seen folks offer and vanish. Don't make me regret believing you." Eli knelt, studying the stones the way he used to study foundations in town. He could see the problem quickly. The old mortar had turned to powder in places. Rain hadn't caused it. There hadn't been enough rain for that. It was time and dryness, stealing strength one grain at a time. He stood up and took his coat off, hanging it over the rail like he belonged there. "I'll need a bucket of water, and whatever you've got for mixing," he said. Clara blinked. "You're starting now?" Eli glanced at the sun, climbing higher. "If we wait, the day gets louder. This kind of work likes quiet." She watched him a moment longer, then turned without a word and went inside. The camera would linger here if it were a film, on the pause at her threshold, on the way her hand stayed on the doorknob a beat too long, as if she was deciding whether to open the door for him in more ways than one. When she returned, she carried a chip bowl, a small sack of dry lime, and a wooden spoon with a cracked handle. She set them down like they were delicate. "This was my husband's," she said, tapping the spoon lightly. "He mixed feed with it. Mixed paint, too. Mixed whatever needed mixing." Eli nodded, careful with his face, careful with his voice. Then it's still doing its job. He worked steadily, not rushing. Stone by stone, he loosened what needed loosening, cleaned away old grit, then rebuilt the edge so the rope would run true. His hands moved with practiced confidence. Thumbs rough, nails worn, palms scarred in the honest places. Clara hovered at first, then busied herself with other things, stacking kindling, pulling weeds near the steps, checking the chicken coop. Every so often she stopped and looked over, as if surprised he was still there. And every so often, Eli felt the same surprise in himself. By mid-morning, the air turned warm and thick. Flies buzzed lazily. Somewhere in the orchard a bird kept calling, sharp and insistent, like a warning that had learned to sing. Clara set a plate on the porch rail without announcing it. 2 biscuits split open, a smear of apple preserves, and a piece of salted pork cut thin like she was stretching it. Eli straightened, wiping his hands on his trousers. "You didn't have to." "I did," she said, firmer than he expected. "Eat." He took the food, and for a moment their hands nearly touched. Clara pulled back quickly, but not in fear, in habit, the kind people build when the world has taught them not to lean too close. He ate on the porch step, looking out at the orchard. Clara sat a few feet away, not beside him, but near enough to share the same shade. "You always been here?" he asked. Clara's gaze stayed on the trees, long enough to know which ones will die first if the water gives out. "That wasn't what I meant," Eli said gently. She gave a small breath, almost a laugh, but not quite. "No, I came here after I married. We planted those trees when the soil still had some kindness in it." Eli nodded. He glanced toward the barn and noticed something odd. One door was chained, the chain newer than the rest of the place. A bright, stubborn line of iron against weathered wood. It wasn't the kind of thing you did for animals. It was the kind of thing you did to keep something in or keep something out. He didn't ask. Not yet. Instead, he took another bite and listened to the quiet, letting it tell him what it could. The orchard was holding on. Clara was holding on. The well, now steadier under his work, felt like a small promise made in stone. When he finished, he stood and went back to the well to test a rope. It slid cleanly. The bucket dipped and rose without scraping. Water came up clear. Clara watched from the porch, arms folded loosely. Her face didn't break into a smile, but her shoulders dropped a fraction, like someone letting go of breath they'd been saving for an emergency. "Looks better," Eli said. Clara walked closer and peered down into the well, as if she didn't trust good news. Then she looked at Eli, eyes searching. "Why are you doing this?" she asked. It wasn't rude. It was a question shaped by disappointment. A question a person only asks when kindness has been rare enough to feel suspicious. Eli wiped his hands again, slower this time. He could have given a simple answer. He could have said, "Because I know stone. Because I had time. Because it felt right." But the truth was heavier than that. "Because," he said carefully, "I've been walking around with my hands empty, and today they finally found something useful again." Clara held his gaze. The wind stirred loose dust across the yard, and for a moment the world seemed to hush, waiting for her response. Before she could give it, a sound drifted in from the road, wagon wheels slow and strained. Then a cough. Then a man's voice calling her name like he owned the air. Clara's face changed in an instant. Not fear, not anger. Something tighter, older. Eli turned toward the gate. A wagon was coming up the track, pulled by a tired mule. A figure sat hunched on the seat, hat low, shoulders narrow. As it rolled closer, Eli could see the man wasn't alone. There was someone beside him, small and still, wrapped in a blanket despite the warm day. Clara's fingers clenched at her sides, and Eli realized with a cold prickle at the back of his neck that whatever this was, it wasn't just a visit. Who was arriving at Clara's gate, and why did she look like she'd been expecting him for years? The wagon creaked to a stop just inside the gate, wheels sinking slightly into the soft dirt where the orchard's irrigation ditch had once run strong. The mule lowered its head, breathing hard. Dust hung in the air, catching the sun like a veil. Clara didn't move at first. She stood very straight, as if stillness might keep the moment from fully arriving. Eli stepped down from the porch and waited. He sensed this wasn't his place to speak. Not yet. The man on the wagon lifted his head. He was younger than Eli expected, maybe late 30s, but worry had carved him thin. His coat was too warm for season, buttoned wrong, sleeves frayed. When he saw Clara, his face softened, not with affection, but with relief. The kind that comes when a burden finally finds a place to rest. "Clara," he said hoarsely, "I hope you were still here." She nodded once. "I am." He swallowed, then gestured awkwardly to the bundle beside him. "This is my daughter, Ruth." Eli noticed then how still the bundle was. Too still. The man climbed down, boots hitting the ground with a tired thud. He hesitated, then reached back and carefully lifted the child into his arms. She couldn't have been more than 9. Her face was pale, her hair damp against her temples, eyes closed like sleep had taken her somewhere far and quiet. "She's been sick," he said, voice cracking. "Fever comes and goes. Doctor in town said fresh air might help. But I ran out of money before I ran out of road." Clara crossed the distance between them in a few quick steps. She placed her hand gently on the girl's forehead, then at her neck, counting without counting. Her face gave nothing away, but Eli saw how practiced her movements were. This wasn't new to her. "You should have come sooner," she said softly. The man looked down. "I didn't want to." That sentence held more than shame. It held history. Eli took it all in quietly. The tone, the pauses, the way Clara didn't ask his name. "You can stay," Clara said, not as an invitation, as a decision already made. The man sagged with gratitude, so sudden it almost knocked him over. "Thank you. I won't be long, just until she's better." Clara nodded again. "Bring her inside." They moved toward the house together. Eli followed a few steps behind, carrying the wagon lantern and trying to make himself small. Inside, the air was cool and smelled faintly of dried apples and soap. Clara cleared the table with quick, efficient motions and laid Ruth down, propping her head just right. Eli watched in the doorway as Clara worked, boiling water, tearing cloth, whispering steady reassurances to a child who didn't wake. Her voice changed when she spoke to Ruth. Softer, older, like a lullaby she'd been carrying for years with no one left to hear it. The man hovered uselessly, hands shaking. "What happened?" Clara asked him quietly, not looking up. He rubbed his face. "After Martha died, it was just me and Ruth. Work dried up. Fever hit the town. I thought I could handle it. I always do." Clara finally looked at him then. Her eyes were sharp but tired. "You don't always have to." He flinched, like the word struck somewhere sore. Outside, Eli stepped back onto the porch, giving them space. The orchard rustled in the breeze. The repaired well stood firm, the ropes still damp from earlier use. Everything looked calm, but it felt like a lie the land was telling itself. Time passed. The sun shifted. Shadows lengthened. Eventually, the man came out and sank onto the porch steps beside Eli without asking permission. "Name's Thomas," he said. "I'm Clara's brother." Eli nodded. That explained the familiarity. "The weight. She doesn't talk about family much," Thomas continued. "Can't say I blame her." Eli chose his words carefully. "Seems like she's carried more than her share." Thomas let out a humorless breath. "She always does." There was silence between them. Then Thomas spoke again, lower. "She didn't tell you, did she?" Eli turned slightly. "Tell me what?" Thomas stared out at the orchard. This place isn't fully hers anymore. Eli felt the words settle like a stone dropped in water. "After her husband passed," Thomas went on, "debts piled up, bad seasons. She borrowed from a lender in town, just enough to keep the orchard alive." He shook his head. Interest grew faster than fruit. Eli thought of the chain barn door, the careful repairs, the way Clara stretched everything she had. "She didn't want anyone to know," Thomas said, "especially not strangers." Eli said nothing. He didn't need to. The truth was already arranging itself in his mind, piece by piece. That evening, Clara came out and joined them, wiping her hands on her apron. Her face was drawn but composed. "She'll pull through," she said of Ruth, "but she needs rest and clean water." Her eyes flicked briefly to the well. Just briefly. "Enough. Thank you," Thomas said. "I know I don't deserve." "That's not how this works," Clara cut in. "Your family." Eli felt the word hang there, heavy and complicated. Later, after Thomas had settled into the barn and the house had gone quiet, Eli stood at the edge of the porch as Clara locked the door. The moon was up now, silver and thin. "There's something you should know," Clara said without turning around. Eli waited. I didn't invite you here because I needed help, she continued. I invited you because I thought you'd be gone by morning. She faced him then, eyes steady. You fixed my well. You stayed. And now, things are messier. Eli met her gaze. I don't mind messy. Her lips pressed into a thin line. You might when you know everything. The wind passed through the orchard, leaves whispering like they were sharing secrets. What wasn't Clara telling him? And how much time did she have left before the truth could no longer be hidden? The night settled in layers. Crickets, distant coyotes, the low creak of the barn as the wood cooled. Eli lay awake on the narrow guest cot Clara had offered him, staring at the dark rafters, listening to a house that breathes like a living thing. Messy, she'd said. By morning, he understood what she meant. The day began with urgency disguised as routine. Clara moved faster than before, her motions precise, almost clipped. She checked on Ruth, prepared a thin porridge, sent Thomas to fetch herbs from the creek bank. No wasted steps, no softness left over. Eli offered to help with the orchard. She nodded but didn't thank him. They worked side by side among the trees, the sun rising higher, the heat building early. Eli noticed how Clara favored her left shoulder when lifting buckets, how she paused just a beat too long before straightening. Small things, easy to miss, hard to ignore once seen. You should rest, he said after a while. I will, she replied, without slowing down. Later? Later never comes, Eli thought. Not for people like her. Near midday, a rider appeared on the road. Not a wagon this time. A single horse, well-fed, well-shod. The man riding it wore a clean coat and a hat that hadn't known much sun. He didn't rush. He didn't need to. Clara saw him at the same moment Eli did. Her spine stiffened. Take Ruth inside, she said quietly to Thomas, who had just returned with the herbs. The rider stopped at the gate and didn't dismount right away. He took in the orchard, the barn, the house, his gaze measuring, weighing. When he finally swung down, his boots landed solidly, confidently, like the ground belonged to him already. Mrs. Hale, he called, voice smooth as oil leather. Didn't expect company. Clara stepped forward. You never do. Eli stayed back, close enough to hear, far enough not to interfere unless asked. The man smiled thinly. I've come to check on my investment. This isn't town business, Clara said. You don't have a right to show up unannounced. He tilted his head. According to the papers, I do. He reached into his coat and tapped something folded inside. Clara didn't need to see it. Her jaw tightened. Crops are failing all over, the man continued calmly. Water's low. Interest is high. You're behind again. I know, Clara said. And yet, he added, glancing briefly toward Eli, you got help. Interesting choice. Eli felt the words land on him like a hand pressing flat against his chest. I hired no one, Clara said. No. The man smiled wider. Shame, because appearances matter, especially when deadlines approach. He stepped closer, lowering his voice just enough to feel intimate, threatening without being loud. 2 weeks, Mrs. Hale. That's what you have left. Clara didn't answer. The man tipped his hat to Eli, a gesture that carried no respect. Then he mounted his horse and rode away at the same unhurried pace, leaving dust hanging in the air long after he was gone. For a moment, no one spoke. Then Thomas swore under his breath. You told me you had more time. I did, Clara said, before the drought worsened. Eli stepped forward. Why didn't you tell me? Clara turned on him, eyes sharp. Because this isn't your burden. That's not how burdens work, Eli said evenly. They don't stay where you tell them. She looked away. I didn't ask you to fix the well. No, he said, but you let me. That landed harder than either of them expected. The rest of the day passed in strained quiet. Eli worked the orchard anyway, repairing a broken trellis, reinforcing a sagging fence. Clara watched from the porch at times, then forced herself to look away, as if seeing him help made something worse. That evening, after Ruth's fever finally broke and the house grew calmer, Clara sat alone at the table, a ledger open before her. Eli stood in the doorway, hesitating. "You planning to leave?" she asked without looking up. Eli stepped inside. "Are you asking me to?" Her fingers tightened around the pencil. "I don't know what I'm asking anymore." He came closer and glanced at the ledger. Numbers filled the pages, neat but merciless. Dates circled, lines drawn through hopes that didn't pan out. "You've been doing this alone a long time," he said. She laughed once, short and dry. "That's what people like me do." "People like you?" Eli asked. She looked up then, really looked at him. "Women who get told they're strong enough. So no one ever checks if they're tired." The room went quiet. Eli pulled out the chair across from her, and Saturday, "I don't have much," he said, "but I know stone. I know foundations. I know how to make things last." Clara shook her head. "You can't fix debt with mortar." "No," he agreed, "but maybe I can help you carry it." Her eyes filled, just barely. She blinked it back fast. "That's the problem," she said softly. "If I let you help, I'll start to believe I'm not alone. And I can't afford to believe that if you're just passing through." Eli held her gaze. "I'm still here." She studied him, searching for the crack where false promises usually showed themselves. She didn't find one. That frightened her more than disappointment ever had. Outside, the wind shifted. Clouds rolled in from the west. Thick, low, heavy with the kind of weather that could change everything or ruin what little was left. 2 weeks, the lender had said. The clock was moving. And for the first time in years, Clara wasn't sure whether holding on alone was strength or just another way to lose everything. What would she risk more, her land or her heart? The storm arrived without ceremony. No thunder. No warning crack in the sky. Just a slow dimming of the world. Like someone turning the wick down on the sun. By mid-morning, clouds pressed low over the orchard, heavy and unmoving. The air felt swollen, thick enough to lean against. Eli stood at the edge of the field, studying the land the way a doctor studies a patient, looking for signs of collapse, for hidden strength. The ground was thirsty, too thirsty. If the rain came too hard, it wouldn't soak in. It would run, carry soil away, tear at roots already weakened. Clara knew it too. She came out onto the porch, arms crossed, eyes on the sky. "If it floods," she said quietly, "the lower orchard's done." Eli nodded. "If it doesn't rain at all, the rest follows." They stood there together, sharing the same worry without turning it into words. Somewhere inside the house, Ruth coughed softly, then settled again. Thomas hovered nearby, torn between gratitude and guilt, sensing the weight he'd added just by arriving. Eli made a decision before fear could argue him out of it. "We need channels," he said. "Temporary ones. Guide the water instead of fighting it." Clara looked at him. "That takes time." "So does losing everything," he replied. They worked as the first drops fell. Not fast, not frantic, purposeful. Eli cut shallow trenches where the land naturally dipped. Clara reinforced them with boards scavenged from the old shed. Thomas hauled rocks. Even Ruth, wrapped in a blanket and sitting on the porch, pointed weakly when she saw water pooling in the wrong place. Rain thickened. The sound grew louder, filling the world until nothing else existed. Water rushed, tested their work, searched for failure. Mud sucked at boots. Hands slipped. Breath came hard. At one point, Clara lost her footing, and Eli caught her elbow, steadying her before she could fall. They froze for a second, rain running down their faces, hands still touching. "Careful," he said. "I am," she replied, but her voice shook, not from the rain. They finished just as the storm reached its peak. Water surged through the channels, aggressive but guided, spilling where they told it to spill instead of where it wanted. Trees bent but held. Soil stayed mostly in place. When it finally eased, the world looked washed clean and bruised at the same time. They stood in silence, soaked, exhausted, watching water drain back into the earth. "You didn't have to do this," Clara said finally. Eli wiped rain from his eyes. "I wanted to." She turned to him, then really turned, and something in her expression shifted. The armor she wore so well showed a crack, not weakness, but truth. "I've been lying to you," she said. Eli didn't flinch. "I know." Her breath hitched. "How?" "Because people who tell the whole truth don't look like they're bracing for impact all the time." She gave a small, broken laugh. "I didn't just borrow against the orchard. I signed a clause. If I miss the next payment, the land transfers immediately. No appeal." Eli felt the weight of it settle into his chest. "That's why the barn's chained." She nodded. Inventory. Proof of value. Silence stretched between them, filled only by dripping leaves. "You should go," she said, "before this becomes yours too." Eli took a step closer. "And if I don't—" Her voice dropped. "Then you'll lose with me." He considered her words carefully. Then he said, "I've already lost enough running away." That night, by lamplight, Eli laid out everything he had. Not much. A small sum saved from stonework jobs. Tools. His hands. His time. "It won't cover the debt," Clara said. "No," he agreed, "but it might buy time." She looked at him, eyes shining, fear and hope tangled together. "Why are you doing this?" Eli answered honestly. "Because somewhere between fixing your well and digging trenches in rain, this stopped being just a place I passed through." She didn't move away when he reached for her hand this time. She didn't rush forward either. They stood there, fingers intertwined, letting the moment earn itself. Outside, the storm clouds broke apart, moonlight slipping through like forgiveness. But morning was coming, and with it, the lender. Morning arrived clear and quiet, the kind that follows a hard night and pretends nothing ever went wrong. The land steamed softly as the sun rose, water lifting from soil and leaves like breath returning to a body. Eli was already up, splitting kindling by the barn. Clara watched him from the porch, a mug warming her hands. She looked different this morning, not lighter, exactly, but steadier, as if something inside her had finally stopped bracing for collapse. The rider came just after breakfast. Same horse, same measured pace, same confidence that came from believing outcomes were already decided. The lender dismounted and glanced around, his eyes narrowing slightly as he took in the orchard, the channels, the damp but intact soil, the trees still standing. "You've been busy," he said. Clara stepped forward before Eli could. Her posture was calm, her voice level. "Yes," she said, "we have." The man reached into his coat, pulling out the folded papers. "Then let's not waste time." Eli moved to Clara's side, close enough that their shoulders nearly touched, not shielding her, standing with her. "There's something you should know," Eli said. The lender looked him over with mild irritation. "This doesn't concern." "It does," Eli interrupted, not raising his voice. "Because the debt you're collecting includes repairs you never disclosed. Faulty terms. Unlawful interest escalation." The man's expression tightened. "You a lawyer now?" "No," Eli said. "I'm a stonemason. I know when something's been built crooked on purpose." He reached into his satchel and produced a stack of papers. Receipts, copies of agreements, notes Clara had kept but never thought useful. Eli had spent half the night reading them by lamplight, fitting truth together the way he fit stone. "And," Eli continued, "you miss one thing. The orchard sits on shared water access. Transfer of land requires county review, which means time." Clara felt the shift before she understood it. The way the man's confidence faltered. Just a fraction. "How much time?" the lender asked. "Enough," Eli replied. The man folded the paper slowly, eyes cold. "This isn't over." "No," Clara said evenly. "But it's not finished today." The lender mounted his horse and rode away. Faster this time, dust kicking up behind him like frustration he couldn't hide. When he was gone, the world seemed to exhale. Clara turned to Eli, her eyes filling despite herself. "You stayed." He smiled softly. "I said I would." Weeks passed. Ruth recovered fully, her laughter returning to the house, like music finding its way back to her room. Thomas found work nearby and stayed longer than planned, not as a burden, but as family. The orchard responded slowly, cautiously, like it was learning to trust again. And so did Clara. Love didn't arrive with grand decorations. It grew in small, undeniable ways. In shared meals. In quiet evenings on the porch. In the way Eli reached for Clara's hand without thinking, and the way she let him. When the county ruling finally came down, it wasn't dramatic. Just fair. Time granted. Terms revised. A future reopened. On the first evening, they allowed themselves to believe it was real. Clara and Eli sat beneath the orchard trees as dusk painted the sky amber. "I spent so long surviving," Clara said softly. "I forgot what it felt like to plan." Eli looked at her. "We can learn." She smiled then, fully, freely, without armor. Seasons turned. The orchard bloomed again. And one quiet morning, Clara realized something she hadn't dared name before. She wasn't alone. Not anymore. The camera would pull back here, wide shot, 2 figures standing among trees heavy with fruit, the land alive around them. Not a story of rescue, not a story of luck, a story of choosing to stay, a story of trust earned slowly, a story of hope built by hand. And if you're listening to this right now, let this be your reminder. It's never too late to rebuild, never too late to be seen, never too late to let someone stand beside you. If this story moved you, share it with someone who might need a little hope today. Subscribe for more stories like this. And tell us in the comments, where are you listening from?